So what was the greatest innovation ever for mankind? Or the greatest moment, it may seem, for mankind's bold new step into the future? And in a future in which mankind not only braved the elements, but had the ability to mold and craft the elements to his desire. Some may go back to the moment of one giant leap for mankind, one small step for man moment in history, signifying the landing of the moon. However, in this discussion, I will point out a much greater moment in the history of man, which has been fairly undermined or underrated in comparison to a lot of other moments in the history of mankind itself. And it has to do with a pinnacle, so to speak, of the species. And in regards to the advancement of, the species as a whole, saying that we are no longer subject to the conditions and the environment that we find ourselves in. And I think I've drawn on long enough what it is that I'm trying to get to. But the reason I've done so is because the actual moment itself may be a little disheartening towards any viewers who were expecting something extremely spectacular, but it's no less a significant moment within the history of mankind because of what it actually signifies itself. And I'll explain that once it is that I reveal what I'm talking about. So, what I'm about to get to is that possibly the greatest moment in the history of the species as we know it is through the invention and the implication of fingernail clippers. Yeah, that's right. I said fingernail clippers. Probably one of the most common household items that you'll ever find. However, once I begin talking about it, and once I begin explaining as to why it is that I argue for the point of fingernail clippers being possibly one of the greatest moments or achievements within human history itself, which is extremely underrated, is due to the fact that it signifies a couple things. It not only signifies mankind's ability to creatively build or manifest something to overcome a problem or a situation at hand, but what it also signifies is the fact that man himself has now, in a sense, adapted or evolved beyond what was once necessary, which his body has produced, and that being fingernails. The environment had changed so rapidly and so profoundly within an extremely short amount of time that the body in which man houses was not able to itself keep up with the changes of the surrounding. Now, you'd have to ask yourself, why is it that we have fingernails in the first place? Well, they're a biological tool. They're a tool that we have evolved because they are very practical in a lot of different situations. They can be used as a weapon. They can be used to perform very fine and articulate tasks with the hands, which would otherwise be very, very meticulous and more so difficult without the use of fingernails, such as tying knots and, pinching very small objects. So it requires a lot of dexterity, and fingernails, in a lot of ways, help this dexterity. Well, what the fingernail clipper actually represents is, in fact, the moment in history in which mankind evolved past what his body deemed as necessary for the environmental conditions in which mankind found himself within. And so we see that, you know, it's really profound once you think about it that way. It's like, you know, it would be like finding some advancement to where you no longer needed your lips or vocal cords or something to that extent, and we found a much more effective means of communication utilizing telepathic thought or something in regards to that extent with a device which pretty much rendered vocal cords a useless appendage on the body. Something to that extent, where something which, you know, normally is very useful now becomes merely something we have to deal with, because at one point in time it was very useful. However, now due to our current advancement and the conditions which we mold and craft into our surroundings, it no longer serves a beneficial purpose like it once did. So that's how I kind of argue the point that, you know, possibly the greatest achievement within the history of man is within the use and implication and discovery and innovation that was the fingernail clippers. And still to this day though, however, I always hate the moment right after I cut my fingernails, because it always seems that I'm trying to like untie some extremely difficult knot in my shoes or something to that extent, where it's like, dang, I really could have used my fingernails at this moment. But yeah, there you have it. And just like with a lot of other things in life, it's usually the ones that we overlook which are the most significant. So, as always, have a great day, everybody, and thanks for watching.